In the headlines, a new chapter in the Russia probe. The U.S. Justice Department opens a grand jury investigation into ex-Obama administration officials. The focus, a possible misuse of intel during the 2016 election. Is diplomacy still on the table? The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin could meet with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, but only if talks are laid out in advance. For Russia, no groundwork, no summit. A violation of human dignity. The United Nations condemns Hamas for releasing hostage videos, and amid the surging violence in Gaza, the international body renews its call for a ceasefire. Health alert in Hong Kong. Officials confirm Hong Kong's first case of Chikungunya fever since 2019. Infections are rising in southern China, and local authorities are moving fast to prevent an outbreak. America's new visa rules sparks global concern. The U.S. is looking to demand a 15 grand deposit from selected foreign visitors, prompting questions about its implementation and impact. And no bail for P. Diddy. Rapper mogul Sean Combs will remain behind bars until the 3rd of October as U.S. court cites safety and flight risk concerns. I'm Franco Baranda. Newsline World starts now. The U.S. Department of Justice has launched a new grand jury investigation targeting top officials from the Obama administration. The move comes in response to the allegations that intelligence was misused in the lead-up to the 2016 election, and it's raising fresh political and legal questions across Washington. Valdivina Gracia files this report.
We're here today to announce a major update.
Attorney General Pam Bondi has authorized federal prosecutors to begin presenting evidence to a grand jury in a case tied to the origins of the now discredited Russia collusion narrative. The investigation follows a formal referral by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who released the classified files last month alleging that senior Obama-era officials, including former Federal Bureau of Investigation Director James Comey, Central Intelligence Agency Director John Brennan, and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, manipulated intelligence to undermine Donald Trump's campaign in 2016. While details remained limited, sources say the case centers on whether these officials knowingly distorted or withheld key intelligence to suggest links between Trump and Russian operatives, an allegation at the heart of the so-called Russiagate controversy. So far, no criminal charges have been filed, and none of the former officials involved have commented publicly. Legal analysts say the grand jury process could take weeks or months before determining whether indictments are warranted. Bondi, a longtime Trump ally, has faced criticism for politicizing the Justice Department, but her office insists the investigation is based on new evidence that could indicate serious misconduct. This marks the first time a sitting attorney general has authorized a grand jury probe into actions taken during a previous administration. The Department of Justice has not announced which individuals may be called to testify or when the first proceedings will begin. Reporting for Newsline World, this is Valdivina Gracia, SMNA News.
The Trump administration has backed away from a controversial policy that tied nearly $1.9 billion in federal disaster preparedness aid to a state's opposition to boycotts of Israeli companies. Previously, Federal Emergency Management Agency or FEMA grant notices required cities and states to certify that they would not sever commercial ties with Israeli firms in order to qualify for money used for search and rescue equipment, emergency staffing, and backup power systems. On Monday, the Department of Homeland Security removed that stipulation from its official language, stating that grants are governed by law, not political loyalty tests. The original policy targeted the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement aimed to pressuring Israel. The new reversal eliminates that linkage from grant eligibility and rescinds prior documentation. The United Nations has condemned the release of recent Hamas hostage videos, calling them an unacceptable violation of human dignity. This comes amid fresh appeals for a ceasefire as the humanitarian crisis worsens in Gaza and violence escalates in the West Bank. This report.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is very shocked by the videos of hostages recently shown by Hamas. Speaking from UN headquarters, his deputy spokesman Farhan Haq made it clear.
Unacceptable violation of human dignity. Turning to Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that many people reportedly continue to be killed and injured, including people seeking food along the UN convoy routes and militarized distribution points.
Haq warned that humanitarian partners are struggling to respond due to depleted supplies. No new shelter materials have entered Gaza since early March. While Israel recently approved more fuel deliveries into the Strip, the UN says it's still waiting for implementation details, even as Tel Aviv announces what it calls tactical pauses in military operations. In the West Bank, violence by Israeli settlers is also on the rise.
Settler violence incidents are on the rise. Last week, OCHA documented at least 24 Israeli settler attacks against Palestinians that resulted in casualties, property damage, or both. OCHA reiterates its call for the protection of civilians in the West Bank, including Jerusalem.
Haq also responded to a public appeal by hundreds of former Israeli security officials asking Donald Trump to help push for peace. While not commenting directly on the letter, the UN reiterated its position.
The Secretary General supports all appeals for a ceasefire in Gaza. He has long believed that what is necessary is an immediate and lasting ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and unobstructed humanitarian access throughout Gaza.
The war began in October 2023 after Hamas-led assault killed over 1,100 people in Israel and took more than 200 hostages. Since then, the Palestinian death toll from Israel's military campaign has reportedly surpassed 60,000, mostly civilians, according to Gaza's health ministry.
There's no legal recognition of any sort of annexation, and he calls again on Israel to abide by international law. Regarding military plans, it's been clear for 2 years that there's been no military solution to this conflict, and meanwhile, there's been a vast amount of suffering and a vast amount of death. It's time for a ceasefire.
For God and my beloved Philippines, Franco Baranda, SMNI News.
Australia has selected Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, or MHI, to deliver its $10 billion Australian general purpose frigate program, the country's largest defense acquisition since the AUKUS submarine agreement. MHI's upgraded Mogami-class frigate was chosen over Germany's Meko A200 design following a decision by the government's National Security Committee. The vessels will boost Australia's naval capabilities with longer range, smaller crew requirements, and advanced air and undersea warfare systems. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles described the deal as a significant step in strengthening Australia-Japan defense ties. The first 3 frigates will be built offshore, while the rest will be constructed in the Western Australia. Delivery of the first vessel is expected in 2029. Up next, is diplomacy still on the table? The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin could meet with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, but only if talks are laid out in advance. For Russia, no groundwork, no summit. And health alert in Hong Kong. Officials confirm Hong Kong's first case of Chikungunya fever since 2019. Infections are rising in southern China, and local authorities are moving fast to prevent an outbreak. Newsline World will be back after the break.
In 2005, Pastor Apollo C. Kibuloy founded the Sunshine Philippines movement. A mission rooted in love for nature and nation. It began as an environmental and humanitarian initiative to reforest Mount Apo. Once barren, now a thriving and beautiful place. Through his initiative, thousands of trees have been planted across the Philippines, bringing life and hope to communities. His advocacy, One Tree, One Nation, is also a movement that calls for unity in preserving the environment. Because every tree planted is a step towards unity, healing, and a greater future. Join One Tree, One Nation.
Could a high-stakes meeting between Presidents Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelenskyy be on the horizon? The Kremlin says it's possible, but only under certain conditions. MJ Mondihar has the details.
The Kremlin has confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin is not ruling out a direct meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. But Russia says that a summit would only be possible once both sides complete thorough groundwork at the expert level. According to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, sufficient progress must be made through diplomatic channels before any high-level engagement can take place. Zelenskyy, for his part, continues to insist that no substantial negotiations with Russia can move forward unless he personally meets with Putin. But Moscow has raised concerns about Zelenskyy's legitimacy since his term officially expired in 2024, and Ukraine's constitution does not provide for a presidential extension under martial law. Despite that, Russia considers Zelenskyy's status an internal Ukrainian matter. Still, Moscow officials warn that any treaty Zelenskyy signs could be vulnerable to legal challenges in the future. Behind closed doors, however, some diplomatic progress is being made. Reports say Ukraine has resumed lower-level direct talks with Russia earlier this year following a suspension in 2022. Those negotiations, held in Turkey, have led to several prisoner swaps and the return of soldiers' remains from the battlefield. For the Philippines, MJ Mondihar, SMNI News.
Hong Kong health officials are on high alert after confirming the city's first case of Chikungunya fever in 6 years. The mosquito-borne disease has been spreading rapidly across parts of southern China. Now, local authorities are stepping up efforts to prevent an outbreak. Justin Nazario reports.
A 12-year-old boy has tested positive for Chikungunya fever after returning to Hong Kong from Foshan, Guangdong. He began showing symptoms including fever, rash, and joint pain shortly after his trip. The case is considered imported, but health officials are closely monitoring the boy and his household. In southern China, the situation is more severe. Authorities in Foshan have reported more than 6,500 cases of the virus in recent weeks. The outbreak has triggered quarantine measures in cities like Fuzhou, while nearby Macau has logged both imported and local infections. In response, Hong Kong Center for Health Protection and the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department have launched intensified mosquito control operations, fogging high-risk areas, clearing stagnant water, and holding community education drives. The public is urged to take precautions, especially after traveling. Officials recommend using insect repellent for 2 weeks, seeking medical help at the first sign of symptoms, and avoiding aspirin or ibuprofen without a doctor's advice. With no vaccine for chikungunya, mosquito control remains the city's best line of defense. This is Justina Zario, your citizen correspondent for God and my beloved Philippines.
A major U.S. tariff hike is set to take effect this week, putting pressure on South African exporters. How is the government planning to soften the blow, and will it be enough? Let's find out in Crystal Guanco's report.
The South African government has unveiled an economic support package to help local industries prepare for the upcoming 30% United States import tariff, which takes effect on August 8. In a joint statement, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and International Relations and Cooperation, or DIRCO, said the package includes an export support desk and a localization fund aimed at easing the impact on jobs and trade. DIRCO Minister Ronald Lamola clarified that goods already in transit before the deadline will still face the current 10% tariff until October 5th. He also noted that 35% of South African exports, including copper, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and other key goods, will remain exempt from the new tariff. Lamola questioned the reasoning behind the tariff, given South Africa's small 0.25% share of U.S. imports, and emphasized that local exports support rather than compete with the American market. The export desk will help companies explore new markets, while the localization fund will support affected sectors. The government is also working with the Department of Labor to reduce the risk of job losses. Trade Minister Sparks Tao confirmed that talks with the U.S. are ongoing. Both departments reaffirmed South Africa's commitment to a fair and mutually beneficial trade relationship. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Crystal Guanco, SM9 News.
The European Union is putting its retaliatory tariffs against the United States on hold, or at least for now. This follows a new deal reached between both sides in a high-level meeting late July. This report from Jane Cagnita.
The European Commission says it will suspend 2 major packages of planned countermeasures against U.S. tariffs for 6 months. The pause comes after an informal meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Scotland on July 27. Trump announced that the U.S. and EU had reached a new trade deal that includes a 15% tariff on European exports, $600 billion in EU investments in the U.S., and $750 billion worth of American energy purchases by Europe. To help implement this agreement, the EU will halt the retaliatory tariffs, originally set to begin this Thursday, which were in response to U.S. duties on European steel, aluminum, and other goods. The total countermeasures, valued at 93 billion euros, were approved by EU member states in late July. These had been drawn up in 2 phases. The first targeting consumer goods like soybeans, motorcycles, and jeans. The second aimed at high-value exports such as aircraft, vehicles, and electrical equipment. Despite the breakthrough, not everyone in Europe is on board. Former EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell called the deal a political mistake. Borrell criticized it as a sign of weakness and said the added commitments are unrealistic for the EU to meet. Before the agreement was reached, European officials had vowed to respond if U.S. tariffs took effect on August 1. With both sides now signaling cooperation, the EU says the 6-month suspension will support efforts to implement the new tariff agreement with the U.S. This has been Jane Cognita, your citizen correspondent for God and my beloved country, the Philippines.
America's new visa rules sparks global concern. The U.S. is looking to demand a $15,000 deposit from selected foreign visitors, prompting questions about its implementation and impact. Back in the Philippines, infrastructure as a tool for peace. In Sultan Kudarat, officials launched a new round of development projects, hoping to turn good governance into a powerful anti-insurgency strategy and a path to lasting stability. More news after the break.
Children will grow up and bring the joy, the love, the peace, and compassion to the whole world. We only have one planet. We only have one Earth. And I hope that this new generation of children that we have reached out will become millions and billions and bring peace on Earth. Bring peace to humanity. Kanang inyong mga cellphone, pagbantay mo sa inyong mga isultihan na mo sa una. Pornography is a spiritual adultery. Kanang pornography, labaw pa na sa shabu. Magdaot imong uto ka na, labi na kung ikaw niya ka sa kingdom ministry, pahingon taglangit, mauna imong kalaban. Because it will destroy everything that was implanted to you spiritually that will let you go to heaven. Pornography is the number one missile of the enemy that will destroy you and your soul to hell. Ayaw jud mo pagtanaw pornography, babaeng lalaki sa inyo. What is dangerous now with cell phones? You can go to the privacy of your room and look at your cell phone without anyone. Only God knows what are you looking at. And mostly, people go to the dark side of the door going to destruction to hell. And that is pornography. It destroys the mind. It destroys the soul. It destroys your spirit. In the spiritual, you don't have to have a doll in order to become a witch. When you psychologically hurt someone, you are a witch. You know how a witch is hurt spiritually? a cold shoulder, mental abuse, physical abuse is witchcraft. Soul winners are not like that. Soul winners are winning souls through love, peace and joy, meekness, gentleness, goodness, kindness. Whether you are on the first, second, or third level of spiritual growth, we are all participating in the same body. We have a care for everyone in the body. Whether you are part of the feet, which is the lowest of all, whether you are in the hand, or whether what part you are, one to another, there is participation of love. That's why Jesus Christ said, love one another, that the world may know you are my disciples.
The campaign against state enemies using good governance has been intensified in the province of Sultan Kudarat. But how is it being carried out? Let's find out from MJ Mondihar.
The government's campaign against the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, National Democratic Front, or CPP-NPA-NDF, and other armed groups is not only focused on military operations. Under the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-LCAC, which continues under the current administration, the anti-insurgency effort moves forward through a whole-of-nation approach. One of its key programs is the Barangay Development Program, which brings projects such as roads, electricity, water, schools, and livelihood to areas formerly under rebel influence. In the province of Sultan Kudarat, the implementation of anti-insurgency and development programs continues without let-up. According to Governor Datu Pax Ali Manguda Datu, the provincial government will construct gymnasiums in schools as part of its development agenda.
As Filipinos, we believe that ang kabataan ay ang pag-asa ng bayan. If there is development, it must start sa ating mga kabataan. So we have selected these schools na ito yung may, number one, malalaki yung population ng ating mga kabataan. Number two, kailangan talaga nila. At number three, wala pa kasing nakakarating na ganung klaseng programa. We wanted na maramdaman nila ang government.
The governor emphasized that this is their way of showing the people that the government is present and that they are not being neglected. The initial implementation will prioritize schools in the 2nd District of Sultan Kudarat.
Remember, these areas, I'm so happy that they are declared as insurgency-free. Pero take note, yung mga for the past, pagdating sa peace and order matters and issues, marami po ang nandyan, perhaps sumasama sa iba't ibang illegal na grupo. Ang sinasabi nila ay hindi kasi nila nararamdaman ng gobyerno. Now, we wanted in the implementation of this program sa maramdaman nila agad-agad. That's why malalayo po itong mga barangay na ating napili na tatayo ng school gymnasium para automatic makita na, o teka, meron pala talagang gobyerno na nagpa-function.
The following towns are part of the province's 2nd District: Bagong Bayan, Esperanza, Calabansig, Lebac, Palimbang, and Senator Ninoy Aquino.
Hindi lamang po yung mobile hospital na umiikot, hindi lamang po yung pag-aayos ng ating mga daan na rehab lang natin yung daan tuwing umuulan, pero meron na po talagang infrastructure program sa kanila na makikita agad-agad that they will feel, teka, for August alone, meron 20 gymnasiums in these areas.
Governor Manguda Datu added that towns under the province's 1st District will be next in line for the program. Alongside these efforts, the provincial government continues to provide free hospitalization for residents. The administration aims to ensure that every citizen feels the presence of a government that is ready to help.
Napakalaking bagay for us to remind the people that there is a government working. And as far as we are concerned in the province, gusto natin na may deliver sa kanila ang lahat-lahat na pwede nating ibigay.
For Government of Philippines, MJ Mondihar, SMNI News.
A hefty new travel requirement is raising eyebrows worldwide. The U.S. government is now requiring certain foreign visitors to pay a $15,000 bond before entering the country. A policy critics say it could hurt families and businesses. This report from Andrea Santos.
It's called the visa bond. And under a newly revived rule from the Department of Homeland Security, selected travelers heading to the United States may be required to pay 15 grand upfront before they even board the plane. The rule applies to some business and tourist visa holders, mainly from countries flagged for high visa overstay rates and poor compliance with deportation protocols. But immigrant rights advocates say the policy punishes people based on their passport, not their actions. Critics argue the financial burden could block families, professionals, and tourists from entering the United States, especially those from low and middle income backgrounds. The bond is fully refundable, but only if the traveler leaves the country before their visa expires. The State Department has not released an exact list of countries affected or how long the policy will be in place. The visa bond program was first introduced under the Trump administration, briefly lapsed, and is now being quietly reinstated. Travelers are urged to check with U.S. embassies before making plans. Andrea Santos, your citizen correspondent, reporting for Newsline World.
Poland is keeping its western border under close watch amid growing pressure over illegal migration and shifting policies in neighboring Germany. Warsaw has extended its temporary border controls. Prince Tripoli for the details.
Poland will keep its border controls with Germany in place until October 4, extending a measure that was initially set to expire on August 5. The measures, which began on July 7, were initially set for just 30 days. The extension follows Germany's stricter border policies that Poland says have increased the migration burden on its side. In response, Poland introduced checks not only along its western border with Germany, but also along its northeastern border with Lithuania. The move is aimed at curbing the flow of undocumented migrants entering from both sides. The back and forth between the two countries began after Germany reinstated border controls in October 2023, targeting crossing from Switzerland, the Czech Republic, and Poland. Under the leadership of German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Berlin has tightened migration rules and significantly increased deportations. In the first half of 2025, Germany deported over 11,800 people, more than 2,000 higher than the same period last year. Polish officials say whether or not they lift the checks will depend on how Germany adjusts its own border stance. For now, the extended measures will stay in place through early October. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Prince Tripoli, your citizen correspondent.
SMNA News.
For our sports update, in Venezuela, a dream has been dashed for a group of young athletes. The Chasic Mara baseball team was all set to represent Latin America at the Senior League Baseball World Series in the U.S., but a last-minute visa denial means they won't be making that trip. Carlo De La Peña has the story.
At the Edgar Ferrer Stadium in Maracaibo, Venezuela, cheers echo as the Cacique Mara Little League team takes to the field. But this game feels different. It's not the only one they had hoped to play. The team had earned a coveted spot at the 2025 Senior League Baseball World Series in East Lee, South Carolina. But just 2 weeks before departure, their United States visas were denied.
Lo del negado de la visa fue algo que no nos esperábamos. Pensábamos que íbamos seguros y llegando allá, el día que el lunes que tuvimos la cita, fue inesperado y nos agarró de sorpresa que nos negaron la visa. Como dicen aquí, un balde de agua fría que no nos esperábamos.
The young athletes, ages 13 to 16, had won the Latin American Championship in Mexico, but their victory celebration quickly turned into confusion and frustration when every single visa application was rejected by the U.S. consulate in Bogota. Team President Kendry Gutierrez says the explanation was tied to a Trump-era executive order that labels Venezuela a national security threat.
Donde nosotros para ellos somos una amenaza terrorista y por lo tanto no calificamos para que nos den las visas porque somos una amenaza para la seguridad de su. Fue muy difícil conversar con los muchachos, ellos tuvieron presencia de todo.
Urgent appeals were filed with both the U.S. State Department and Venezuela's National Little League Board. For a moment, there was hope. The team was asked to resubmit passports, but soon after, they were informed, again, that they would not be allowed to travel. In their absence, Mexico's Santa Maria de Aguayo, the tournament's runner-up, was invited to take their place. The U.S. State Department says it is currently reviewing the decision. Meanwhile, Little League International has confirmed that Cacique Mara will not be participating this year. For now, the boys of Cacique Mara can only watch from afar. But on the diamond in Maracaibo, they're still playing, still dreaming, and hoping one day the doors won't be closed. This is Carlo de la Peña reporting SMNI News.
Up next, as President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visits India, Philippines Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco highlights the country's bid to become a top destination for Indian tourists. And no bail for PDD. Rapper mogul Sean Combs will remain behind bars until the 3rd of October as a U.S. court cites safety and flight risk concerns. Stay tuned for more news.
Hala, magnanakaw!
Magnanakaw! Magnanakaw!
Uy, magnanakaw!
Magnanakaw! Magnanakaw!
Ano kayang gagawin ko? Ipamimigay ko yung konti para tumigil sila sa pag-iingay.
Pare, magnanakaw, namimigay ng pera.
Eto ang sayo.
Wow! Ang bait ng magnanakaw!
Eto naman sayo.
Kuya, yung
eto
share ko! Sana
Huwag ka nang maingay. Eto pa. Tama na yan. Nakikipalato lang kayo eh. Huwag nang maingay. Diba? Konti lang pinamigay ko, mabait na ako. Tahimik na sila. Easy. Ngayon, pwede ko na tong suluhin.
Masaya ang mga tao, pero tama po ba ito? Di po ba ang nakikinabang sa magnanakaw ay kasabwat ng magnanakaw?
Ikaw, kinukonsenti mo ba ang legal na korupsyon?
Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has announced that private contractors involved in irregularities in flood control projects will be blacklisted and possibly face illegal charges. Full details from Creslin Catarong.
Speaking in the third episode of the BBM podcast, Sa Likod ng Sona, aired on Monday, Marcos said some companies have already been identified for substandard or suspicious work on government projects.
We already have some names that are coming up that will be, first of all, corporations that mga contractor na talagang kitang-kita na hindi magandang trabaho nila. So, we will put them on a blacklist. Hindi na sila pwedeng magkontrata sa gobyerno.
The president emphasized that these contractors must account for how project funds were spent.
Pag hindi sila makapag-explain na mabuti, we will have to take it to the next step.
Marcos had earlier instructed the Department of Public Works and Highways and the Regional Project Monitoring Committee to compile a list of all flood control projects from the last 3 years, specifically identifying failed or non-existent ones. This directive was part of his recent State of the Nation Address, or SONA, on July 28. He also urged the public to report any irregularities they've observed in flood control initiatives in their communities. In line with this, Marcos Jr. has issued a stern warning to those behind the country's failed flood control projects, stressing that someone must be held accountable for the suffering endured by Filipinos. He explained that his decision to highlight the issue during his SONA was driven by the destruction he witnessed following recent typhoons, damage worsened by poorly executed or defective flood control efforts. When asked who should be held accountable, the chief executive stopped short of naming individuals, but pointed out that some parties involved are already notorious
for their role in fraudulent schemes. He also emphasized that the investigation will be impartial, assuring the public that no one will be exempt from accountability, not even those aligned with the current administration.
Sorry na lang. Hindi na kita kaalyado kung ganyan ang ginagawa mo. Ayaw na kitang kaalyado.
For God and for a beloved country, the Philippines. This has been Carceline Catarong, SMNI News.
Saudi Arabia is proposing new rules to tighten how domestic labor is advertised, aiming to protect workers and curb misleading online posts. With draft regulation bans the use of the Labor Ministry's name, logo, and platforms like Mossad or Ajir in aid. Posting photos or videos of workers is also prohibited. Only resumes personally approved by the worker will be allowed. Group interviews, discrimination, and extra fees for workers, all strictly banned. The rules would apply to all recruiters, agencies, and individuals across social media, apps, and more. All transactions must go through the official Mossad system. The goal? Ethical hiring, better protections, and full compliance with Saudi labor laws. The Migrant Workers Office in Riyadh is urging overseas Filipino workers to stay alert for scams as the proposal remains under review. As President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. kicks off his state visit to India, one cabinet official is making her own push to strengthen tourism ties. Tourism Secretary Cristina Garcia Fresco is taking center stage in efforts to position the Philippines as the top destination for Indian travelers, just as the two nations mark 75 years of diplomatic relations. This report from Jason Rubrico.
Tourism Secretary Cristina Garcia Frasco is part of the Philippine delegation accompanying President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. on his state visit to India, which officially began Monday, August 4. The visit coincides with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and India and highlights efforts to deepen cooperation in trade, aviation, and tourism. Frasco reaffirms the Philippines' commitment to becoming a top destination for Indian travelers, emphasizing that with the influx of Indian tourists, she looks forward to creating more employment and livelihood opportunities for the Filipinos. Frasco said that they have placed strategic focus on the Indian market, recognizing its vast potential from enhancing connectivity and visa facilitation to promoting travel experiences for Indian tourists. As part of her agenda, Secretary Frasco is scheduled to meet with the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry to map out strategies to attract more Indian tourists to the Philippines. She will also engage with airline executives from Air India and Indigo, as well as tourism stakeholders from hotels, resorts, and travel companies to promote greater connectivity and investment in the Philippine tourism sector. Frasco is also set to explore creative collaborations with India's National Film Development Corporation to support film tourism and cultural exchange. For God and my beloved Philippines, I am Jason Rubrico, SMNI News.
For our showbiz update, what was meant to be a landmark moment for Oasis at Wembley turned tragic after a concert goer fatally fell from the stands. Liam and Noel Gallagher have spoken out as investigations continue. And in the US, rapper and music mogul P. Diddy will remain behind bars after a judge denied his latest bid for release. Here's Sigrid Castañeda for our showbiz news.
What was meant to be a historic night for Oasis at Wembley Stadium turned tragic when a man in his 40s reportedly fell from the upper tier during the concert. Despite quick response from medics, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Liam and Noel Gallagher said they were shocked and saddened, offering condolences to the victim's family. No foul play is suspected, but authorities are reviewing the incident. The band has not announced any tour changes, but the mood remains somber. It's been nearly a year since Diddy was taken into custody, and now the court says he's not getting out just yet. On Monday, a federal judge in Manhattan denied Sean Diddy Combs' request for pre-sentencing release, saying there are still concerns about public safety and potential flight risk. The ruling means Combs will remain at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn until his sentencing date set for October 3. The judge's decision came despite a letter of support filed by Combs' ex-partner, urging the court to consider him not a danger. Prosecutors argue the case goes far beyond lifestyle choices, pointing instead to serious allegations tied to coercion and federal prostitution-related charges. While Combs maintains that the events in question involved consenting adults, the government says otherwise, and the legal battle is far from over. Meanwhile, Combs' legal team has raised concerns over conditions inside facility. In a recent filing, they claimed that a music mogul had been served expired and unsanitary food, including one instance allegedly involving maggots. Federal prison officials have strongly denied the accusations. Combs has now been in custody for 11 months. His sentencing in October could bring clarity to a case that has captivated both the music world and the courts. This is Sigrid Castañeda, your citizen correspondent, bringing you latest showbiz.
And before we end, may be inspired with the words of the sun. If your voice held no power, they would not try to silence you. And that's all for this edition of Newsline World. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, I am Franco Baranda. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
This is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.